Welcome to Aging Insights. Thank you for joining us for this program. I'm Grace Egan, Executive Director of the New Jersey Foundation for Aging. The Foundation's mission is to promote policies and programs that enable seniors to live with independence and dignity in their communities. On Aging Insights programs, we address a variety of topics including health issues, economic and food security, creativity, and fitness. Our guests today include Lois Kipnis, author and caregiver, and Eileen Doremus, Executive Director of the Mercer County Office on Aging. We're going to talk with our guests today about their caregiving experiences and creative coping options that enabled them to focus on their loved one and to re-energize and nourish themselves as well. Thank you both. I'm really thrilled to have you here because as you explain your experiences, you both were able to use your creative mind, your sensitive heart, and to use that to create something that enabled you to create a balance in your life while you were doing this very stressful at times work. So I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having
It's very
us.
personal
Glad
in
to be
reality.
here.
So,
Thanks, Grace.
Lois, I know you're a caregiver for your mother, and so maybe you could explain that, and how long have you been doing that?
My mom actually lived by herself in a senior apartment building in Massachusetts until she was 90.
Wow.
And that was the last of the good years, and she was falling and having trouble really tending to herself. So that year became one of, I was in New York, she was in Massachusetts, and the phone calls, she fell, and ultimately what happened is she was no longer able to live by herself. She fell and hurt herself so badly she needed to be in rehab, and ultimately needed to go into a nursing home because there were no funds to really keep 24-hour help, and she needed 24 hours. And so I placed her in a nursing home in Massachusetts, right near where she lived, because her friends were still there, and that's where she wanted to go if she had to. But after a year and a half, I was the only sibling left at that point, and my husband and I were going back and forth, New York, Massachusetts, and after a year and a half, I had to move her here to New York. Yes, closer to the nursing home. But even though she's in the nursing home, I'm her connection, you know, and so that's my caregiving role is really the emotional connection and finding things to help her still keep her dignity, to keep her thriving and as independent as she can be, which isn't much. But
so how long have you been her caregiver?
So she's about to be 97, so it's so
there you go.
It's been
That's a long time.
Almost 7 years. So
I'm sure you've seen a lot of change over the years too in terms of her personal capacity.
Yes. I mean, originally it was the walker, and then she tried the scooter, but that didn't work, and it would then wheelchair, and there's really physically great limitations, and then the past few years dementia has set in, and so I see that piece now, the difficult piece to deal with.
Right. There really is that role reversal that is just so startling, and I guess I'm just wondering, how do you cope with that role reversal as well as the stress of being the primary caregiver? You can't. You're not sharing it with siblings anymore.
Right. Although some people tell me that's better. I don't know.
Well, maybe for decision making, decision making might be better. But
it was difficult to see a very independent woman and see her become so dependent, and an intelligent woman feeling, she admits it, feeling stupid, confused. And so I did a lot of, in the beginning, a lot of screaming and yelling, and I was angry, I was resentful.
Oh, at her?
No,
got
myself.
Home.
Oh yeah, I would have those Tevye from Fiddler-like conversations, please, whatever. My father's picture, I would be by her bedside, and I would have conversations with him, help me, what do I do? I wrote an imaginary letter to my grandma and my father saying, please help me, any cures, remedies. But I wrote, and that became my outlet. I was in a writing class, and what I found was there would be a prompt given, and without realizing it, whatever I wrote was in response to the prompt. And when I decided to write a book, I looked and I said, oh my gosh, I have I've really been writing our story all the time, because anytime there was a prompt, the prompt was, is it ever permissible to tell the truth? That was just a writing prompt in a group. And I wrote a whole letter back and forth, which is in the book, letters back and forth to my mom that addressed the aging issue. And should I tell her the truth? You know, yes, you are aging. Yes, this is happening, etc. So writing for me was my salvation. It was my creative outlet.
Now, you were always comfortable with creative arts in your work experience.
With theater, yes.
Right,
But my writing up to that point really had been more educational. It had been books for teachers based on the work I was doing with drama in the classroom. So this kind of writing was very, very new for me.
Very personal.
It was very personal, right. It was very personal. But, you know, by writing and then by ultimately publishing the book with all the writings, the response from caregivers has been wonderful, because what they've thanked me for sharing things they're afraid to say.
Right.
I was very honest, you know, in the book too.
It's also very humorous. I don't want people to just to say the truth is. Well, the truth is life sometimes is funny.
Right.
So,
Yes. I know. I've always survived. It's my mother instilled that in me. You face Christ with humor, and so I did. There's a tremendous amount of humor in it.
There is.
There's a tremendous amount of honesty in it also, and caregivers have thanked me for giving them almost the courage to admit they have all these feelings, because they're afraid to. You know, they're sometimes afraid to admit that they are angry or they're resentful. And I must say, too, there was a great turning point for me. I was struggling with something I was writing, and I went to my workshop, and a friend in the group realized she just felt the pain. She emailed me that night a poem that was written by someone who had Alzheimer's through the eyes of someone, you know, and it said, please just don't criticize me, don't correct me, you just listen to me, hold my hand, validate my feelings. And I have to tell you, that was a turning point for me. I just suddenly, I said, wait a minute. I'd been focused so much on my feelings, I'd forgotten her. You know, I had really forgotten it. And I left the nursing home one day. I remember walking down the hill, and I said, I have a choice. I'm leaving the nursing home.
Yes.
I've left behind, no longer the woman she once was. And from that time on, I stepped into her shoes, and I wrote several pieces. I wrote a letter, please forgive me. And then I wrote a piece where a woman is scattering the ashes of her mom and finds a message in a bottle. And the message is from a 94-year-old woman in a nursing home who says, if you find this, please get your SWAT team, and here are the clues I'll give you in order to rescue me. But I took all my mother's complaints about being in a nursing home and not in her apartment, and in a, you know, humorous but honoring her feelings, put that into that message in the bottle and validate it. And so from that point on, I really said, you know, okay, look, what can I do to make this better? There's much out of my control.
Right. And have you shared some of your writings with your mother?
I have. I haven't read really from
those
the book
that are
yet.
appropriate.
Right. We've been writing together a few things. I went recently one day, and I said, Ma, you know, in my writing class, we're supposed to write something about how you once felt and feel now. And I thought it would be fun to do it through a perspective of a younger person and older person. So I'm going to ask the grandkids to do it. And so we went out in the courtyard, and I said, what did you once think about or wonder about? And she said, well, I once wondered if I'd reach old age. And I said, and now? She said, I'm an old lady, you know. And so we went through that. I put it together in a short poem and read it to her. And then I'm working on a longer piece with it. So I've been doing that. I wrote a poem one day about my dad, and I brought it, and I said, Ma, did I forget anything? And she said, oh, no, that's really good. But she felt a part of it.
Sure.
In fact, I was telling you before that I found a picture of her when she was, you know, a little older than I was, and I brought it the other day, and I wrote a little haiku for her and put it on here, and she just smiled. And I said, you know, what do you really like about this picture? And she said, oh, my smile, or oh, I like, and look how beautiful the flowers are. So I'm going to write that up, and I'll bring it back to her, and she's starting to enjoy
It's nice.
being part of it. You know, I think it's trying to find what can they still do? And what can we do together? You know, I think that's
lovely.
That's
lovely.
an important part of it.
Right. Would you care to share some of your writings or reflection that you've captured so nicely in your book with us?
Sure. Okay. Now, this is not the humorous side, so
No, it's okay.
Trust Grace and trust me. The book is filled with humor.
Right. It is.
I'll read this only because I think it's a good example of how anybody who is being cared for, as well as the caregiver, really could write their feelings. It was a writing class, and the prompt was, what do you hope for? What do you wish? So it's called the Caregiver's Prayer. I think I probably should have called it an aging person's prayer, because I realized I am in there, because this is all a dress rehearsal. Right? It's a dress rehearsal for me. That's what it is. And I had just placed her in the nursing home, and I can't tell you, it was like this. Oh, my heart was heavy, very heavy. So I wrote this. A caregiver's prayer. Our wishes, strong desires with a minimum chance of fulfillment. Our hopes, strong desires with an expectation of an outcome. I wish I could run a marathon, but hope I can always walk without assistance. I wish I could travel the world, but hope I can continue to drive my car. I wish I could eat pepperoni pizza, but hope I can always feed myself. I wish I could read every literary masterpiece, but hope I will always recognize my grandchildren. I wish I could afford spas, massages, and manicures, but hope I can always bathe and dress myself. I wish my hands were silky, steady, sunspot-free, but hope someone will hold my hand when I need a hand. I wish I could remain ageless, but hope I age with dignity. I wish I could give my mom the gift of independence, but hope she'll learn to accept her dependence. I wish I could provide her with tools to fix her problems, but hope she'll learn to navigate with her wheelchair. I wish I could hold her hand as she did mine, let go and watch her soar. But I've clipped her wings and placed her in a nursing home. I wish I could reverse events, but hope she'll hold my hand and let my love comfort her. Our wishes, strong desires with a minimum chance of fulfillment. Our hopes, strong desires with an expectation of an outcome.
Lovely.
You know, and I really encourage everybody to write. Really, both caregiver and person caregiver. I think what a wonderful thing, because I think I'm going to do this now that we're talking. I'm going to do this with my mom and tell her, Mom, here's a poem I wrote. What do you wish? What do you hope? And I think you don't have to think about it. Just sit down. You know, you wake up in the morning. You know, this morning I woke up and I thought about, and just write something. Really, just
and
see
even
where
if
it takes you.
Right.
You know?
And even if the person doesn't have the capability of writing it, you do, or even recording it, because their voice might really be important to capture for later.
That's it. That's it. I mean, I've captured bits and pieces of my mom's dialogue in terms of how she feels, because she was at that stage last year where the dementia, she knew she was confused, but still knew, and so she kept feeling stupid, and so I captured all her phrases and have done that, you know, in a poem. But just to sit and write for yourself, there's something cathartic. There's something healing.
Even if you're making lists for things you want to do in the course of your day, it may not be prose. And I think journaling, there are a lot of journaling workshops and different things like that. The prompts are very interesting, and you've sort of touched on this before. I wanted to ask you how you incorporate such humor and warm sentiment, but it sounds like that's what your mother gave you.
That's what my grandmother and grandfather gave that to my mom, and she gave that to me. We kind of have always grown up with that, that there's a quote, life's not about surviving the storm, but how to dance in the rain, you know. And you have to. I mean, as I'm aging, and you know, my friends are aging, and we're joking about it, but we know we're serious. It's not that we're joking about it, but we're trying to figure out, how, you know, otherwise, you know, whatever. And also, she was such you know, such a wonderful, warm person, and she was funny.
And you know, I think there is such a stress on the burden of caregiving when there is joy in caregiving also, and I think you know, by you sharing, especially about the humor, if we can take a look at the lighter side of things, I think it
Right.
also helps with our ability to cope,
I agree.
which is what all this caregiving is about.
Right. When you look at, you know, how many individuals are informal caregivers, whether they're not
Sure.
have someone at home or whether they're visiting somebody. Eileen, you have been a long-term caregiver as well for many loved ones over the years, and I presume you see that similar blending of sadness, loss, and yet a warm remembrance over time?
Yeah, my situation is a little different. My dad had dementia for 10 years. He passed away 3 years ago. But boy, you know, what an interesting journey he was on. And unbeknownst to me, the following year, my husband had fallen and had an injury, and he also had developed a cancer that was undetected, and within 3 months, we lost him. So my caregiving through, and I had shared this with Grace, and I think it's really important that as the executive director at an office on aging, and really looking at a lot of the caregiver services that we make available to people in New Jersey, in particular, our county, Mercer County. You think you have all the answers, and you think you know it all, and you can tell people to go here and go there, and this is how you should respond. And then when that professional world and your personal worlds collide, it's a whole different ballgame, but an important one. And the ability to be able to now practice what I preached for so long wasn't so easy. I'd say I was the primary caregiver for my husband, but for my dad and now my mom, who has some memory issues, I'd more consider myself a long-distance caregiver, even though they're, you know, maybe an hour away. But I have a sister who I would say is the primary caregiver, with siblings who help out. And I think sometimes the challenge for caregiving is people don't even identify themselves as caregivers.
True.
They will say things like, but that's my mom. I'm not a caregiver.
Right.
Yes, you are. That's my daughter. She has been living with a disability all her life. I'm not a caregiver. And I think that's one of the challenges as a professional, that we really try to make sure that we connect with people so they can identify themselves as caregivers to get the appropriate support and programs and services perhaps that they need, whether it's the informal things like you're talking about and the helpful or some of the more important ones that help people get through the day.
And I know we've talked about the reciprocal relationship that you can have that gives you a little bit of joy for caring for a loved one, but it's not always a joy for some people.
Exactly, exactly. And important to know that there's some caregiving that's done out of duty. I do it because I have to do it. You don't, you know, think about relationships, lifelong relationships aren't necessarily the happiest for everyone.
Correct.
And in that kind of a situation, you know, we have to be very clear and work with people to understand that there's still a way to take care of somebody, even if the relationship you had previously. I think a lot of people, family members will come and talk to me about their caregiving situations, and it's so interesting that they think that even though things may not have gone too well earlier on in their life, they think that now mom or dad has this situation, that everything's going to be okay and we're going to work on this. You know, I often remind myself, I'll remind my staff, and I remind the people going through caregiving, the diseases that we talk about that we're caregiving for, we kind of can understand those. The tougher part is understanding the family dynamics that go on in the caregiving role, and that usually is probably more of a challenge or more of, you know, what we really need to be focusing on as not only professionals but also as you know, personal caregivers.
Are you saying everybody doesn't mellow?
Sort of, right. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for some awareness, you know, amongst family members, and I think that's really an important part of what you know, we do on a professional level.
I think it's important to give people the tools and maybe through your own experience to understand how you sort of look at those experiences and get ready for the next day. I mean, so what creative outlets did you use?
I also, fortunately, had always enjoyed writing. So I did a lot of my expression of, actually a lot of my expression of grief I've done through writing. Anytime there's a reason to celebrate, I like to do that through writing. So that's something that I've always had with me. I think important to a lot of people is the ability for prayer, the ability to reach out to family, to reach out to friends. As a creative person, I am also a huge sports fanatic, so I find a lot of comfort in a lot of the things that go on in the sports world. And so finding that interest, that hobby, that passion, and keeping up with it, I think is really an important part of it, and that ability to refocus and to continue on.
It actually is a respite moment if you are a sports fan and you're just throwing yourself into that game or that athletic competition or whatever it is. So I think that's kind of an interesting outlet. What I think is lovely with the both of you is that, you know, we're not talking about expensive tools here.
No.
You know, so we're not talking about, you know, the large canvas and the expensive oil paints where, you know, yes, maybe sketching with a pen might be reasonable, but the idea that you've been able to kind of use writing and what you're comfortable with to sort of give you that outlet, whether it's hobbies. I know you have some other hobbies.
And you know, Grace, some of the other interesting things that are going on are for the people who are actually experiencing the changes of dementia.
Right.
And there's a lot of programming now for people that you can do actually individually in your home. So Lois with your mom, other people with their person. I know I was a trained time slips person, and time slips allows the person with dementia to take a look at a picture, and in looking at the picture, they create a story, and so they become an author.
Right.
And how interesting now when instead of talking about the person with dementia, now you talk about the author.
Right.
You know, and it really gives
Well, that's what I'm going to do with this picture, because she gave me all the dialogue. It was just 2 days ago. I'm going to write it now and bring it to her, because it's what she told me about the picture. You know, it's her picture. You know, I tried a picture, and this she went right to. It was her. You know, so that's it.
Yeah, I think it's lovely. You must also see in your office, Eileen, in the County Office on Aging, an awful lot of caregivers who, you know, who come in for services not only for their care recipient, but for themselves.
Or don't even realize that there are programs and services. Fortunately, the Older Americans Act has recognized that caregiving is so very important, so there are caregiver services available in each county through their Office on Aging. A lot of caregiver education. I know Mercer County is fortunate to have a program called Skills to Care, whereby we pair a caregiver with an occupational therapist who is trained in working with people with dementia, but they are the caregivers' support system. And what they do is tailor a program for them to better understand some of the changes that are going to be occurring with dementia, but also how they can respond and build some skills to better handle some of those changes as time goes on. So we're pretty proud to have that program with the hopes that it's something that's going to be able to, you know, eventually be throughout the state.
And when you couple that with some caregiver support groups, or respite. I mean, this does sound like you're really giving, through the skills program, the ability for someone to deal with, you know, the ongoing changes that
and giving the caregiver the permission to take a break.
There you go.
The permission to know that it's okay to feel all the things that you were talking about, Lois. You know, and that's so very important too. I mean, support can be an in-person support group. There's online support groups. There's telephonic support groups. So there's so many different ways for people now to get the education and the support that they need. And there's nothing like sitting across from someone who's nodding their head and acknowledging that, you know, oh, you understand. You've been in my shoes.
Yeah.
You've walked in my shoes. I will hear caregivers say time and time again, it is so nice to talk to somebody who knows what I'm dealing
Who
with.
understands. So the message that we would want caregivers to understand from this program would be?
I think you need to do for yourself and your caregiver. I think that you need to take care of yourself as well as the person you're caring for, and I think you need to find outlets for both of you.
Right.
I think that's, I think.
And I think that caregivers are extremely extraordinary people doing extraordinary things, and that we, myself now as a professional, need to make sure that we acknowledge that and let caregivers know how special, how important the job that they're doing.
And there are so many out there, and as you say, sometimes they don't realize that there
That's
are
right.
services out there for them. So while they can do something personal within their lives, there are also community agencies that they can reach out to
Absolutely.
as well. So I think that's really incredibly helpful. So I think we've really covered a lot today, and I think that I'm really very pleased you could both be here. And so we want to make sure that people, you know, reach out, that they understand their feelings are validated. It's frustrating, it's rewarding,
Right.
Good.
as well, and you really need a whole support system, I think, to do this important work. So I
And
really
there's a
appreciate-
place to call.
And there are
places
And there's
to
a piece
go
of
and
paper and a pen and
Yeah,
pencil to
to
just
create.
Exactly.
write.
Yeah.
To just
Exactly.
write, just
Yeah.
let the feelings go
Right.
wherever. Nobody has to even ever see them.
That's
you know?
true.
And you may even, you know, find maybe a group. I started at the library, but find a group even. Just
Right. You
sharing.
do writing workshops?
I am about to venture forth. I have created a writing prompt, 10 writing prompts.
There you go.
Based on the book. Like if you found a message in a bottle, what would your
Nice.
message be? Write the message, etc. One-line pieces, and I'm working on getting it up on the website.
Right.
So
So thank you both
Thank you.
very much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
This is, I think, a very important program. So thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's very
You're welcome.
wonderful.
You're welcome.
So I want to just remind people that Aging Insights is produced by the New Jersey Foundation for Aging. We always appreciate your feedback on this show or others, or you can make donations as well as your comments by going to our website at www.NJ Foundation for Aging, or you can call our office, which might be easier for some folks. It's 609-421-0206. We want to remind you to find out about senior services in your area. You can contact your county office on aging. You can see a listing of their numbers on our website, or you can go to the state hotline number, which is 1-877-222-3737. Thank you for watching this episode, which I think was very important. And remember, aging is everyone's business.